The initial explosion hit early yesterday morning and was felt.
Emergency crews remain on the scene right now.
Suddenly, there was an explosion.
After an explosion and ferocious fire.
There is no way I would ever consider going back to tubular. There's just too much risk versus reward for tubular versus spray cooled, in my opinion.
Good morning. I'm Ron Ashburn. I'm the Executive Director of the Association for Iron and Steel Technology, and I welcome you all to the AISTech Town Hall Forum. Before we begin, I would like to point out our emergency egress route. So in case we need to evacuate, please exit back out the doors that you entered, turn right, and go right outside to the street level. As with many of the events that comprise AISTech, this town hall serves to disseminate new ideas that collectively improve the welfare of our industry. And from this perspective, we're doing really good. The steel industry is better today than ever before. And we must remain committed to say the same a decade from now. To this end, there are bedrock principles for which we should insist on continuous improvement. Steel companies need to be safely operated for their people. They need to keep the air we breathe and the water we drink free from contamination. Companies need to reduce energy consumption and build reliable supply chains. They need to relentlessly innovate their technology. They need to cultivate a workforce through culture and commitment. And they need to be profitable. Profit is ingredient number one, and it's not a four-letter word. Sustainable companies do the right things all the time. And the best companies have leaders who can articulate their vision, not just for the shareholders, but for all stakeholders, including their employees, the suppliers, their customers, and their communities. We need to be accountable to all in that value chain. And the best companies have a strategy for differentiation, the ultimate value proposition for any steel company. It takes great people to build great companies that go on to do great things. And as people, we must all aspire to build truly sustainable companies that are shining assets for our industry, for today and tomorrow. Our mission this morning is to tackle the key issues that march us one step closer to that goal. And for the town hall today, we will accept audience questions via email to townhall@aist.org. That's townhall@aist.org. Please include your name and your company for your question to be considered. I also want to acknowledge our exclusive Town Hall Forum sponsor, the Systems Group. We are indeed grateful to TSG for their support of this program. I also want to thank our two global event sponsors, Superbooth and the Systems Group, for their support of AISTech. I would ask you to please join me in thanking our sponsors, Superbooth and the Systems Group. Thank you. Now to introduce our panelists, please welcome to the podium the Town Hall Chair representing Hatch Associates, George Koenig.
Morning, everybody. How we doing? Good? Well, welcome to the 21st Annual Town Hall Forum. I am really proud and excited to be the Town Hall Chair again in 2023. This event was born 21 years ago when the steel industry was going through a difficult time. It needed something new and fresh. It needed to inject some positiveness and enthusiasm into the industry. I was lucky enough to have the idea for the Town Hall. We made it happen, and it was an overwhelming success. Then I got lucky again. I became connected with Ron Ashburn as the ISS merged with the AISE to become AIST. And I want to give a shout out to Ron and his group, his team, who have helped make the town hall into what it is today. Specifically, Chris McKelvey, Sam Cusack, Nicole Matter, among others. Just a tremendous effort to put this on for you. So let's give the AIST team a round of applause. Early on, Ron and I established some guidelines for the forum that we still execute today. Number one, we must spend quality time each year selecting the panelists. We both must agree 100% on the panelists we select. And then we must work with the panelists to get them prepared for the forum. The format for the forum each year would be an informal living room type setting with five or six industry leaders. I think one year we had 7, where they address the topics of the industry, the issues that are going on, the opportunities, no presentations, no script, just a friendly interaction. And lastly, we agreed that each year we would keep the event fresh. I believe we have done that for this year. Our industry is going through an exciting and significant change. With change, there's so many unknowns. It's exciting, it's challenging, it's a little bit scary. The end result, we will be a more successful industry. Hopefully, between overall this conference and this morning's town hall forum, you will go back home with a better understanding of what is happening in our industry and where it is going. Simply said, you're going to go back home with news to use. So sit back, relax, enjoy the interaction of the forum, learn a lot, and enjoy yourselves. Okay, with that said, it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce the 2023 Town Hall panelists. I ask that you hold your applause until each panelist is introduced. Starting on your left, we have Rich FRUEHAUF, Senior Vice President, Chief Strategy and Sustainability Officer, United States Steel. Shushma Walker, President, New Core Business Technology. Barry Schneider, President and Chief Operating Officer, Steel Dynamics. And starting last night, this year's AIST President. TRACI Forrester, Executive Vice President, Environmental Sustainability at Cleveland Cliffs. Mike Williams, President and CEO of Timken Steel. Let's give our panelists a warm round of applause for their efforts today. Our moderator, back for his 14th year, is John Delano. John is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Haverford College, University of Pennsylvania Law School. John is the money and political editor for KDKA TV, the CBS station in Pittsburgh. He is also an adjunct professor of public policy and politics at Carnegie Mellon Heinz College. We are pleased to have him back again this year, so let's give John a nice round of applause. Thank you, and again, enjoy the morning.
Well, good morning, everybody. You can do better. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Detroit for this 21st Town Hall of the Association for Iron and Steel Technology. 21 years old. This brainchild of George Koenig has now come of age. I don't think that means we should drink some of the hard stuff at this early hour, but I'm always happy to toast George and his partner, Ron Ashburn. After 2 decades, this town hall has become one of the steel industry's signature events, a chance to hear the candid comments of real insiders in this industry. So join me again in congratulating George and Ron. A special word of thanks also to the AIST staff, who do an amazing job, as George mentioned, planning. For me, particularly Chris McKelvey, for all his help on logistics, and the incredible Sam Cusack, whose knowledge of the steel industry amazes me and who takes my calls at all hours of the day and night as I prepare for the program. As George mentioned, this is my 14th time as your town hall moderator, and I really join them in welcoming this outstanding group of panelists today to the stage. They represent 5 exemplary steelmakers: Cleveland-Cliffs, Nucor, Steel Dynamics, Timken Steel, and U.S. Steel. 3 of our panelists are new to the stage: TRACI, Sushma, and Rich, while Mike was a panelist back in 2012 for a different company. And Barry, well, Mr. President now, keeps coming back every other year, 2019, 2021, and now back in 2023. I love it. So welcome to each of you. Very much appreciate your being here. The theme of today's town hall is aptly named Steel 23, Get Your Motor Running. The steel industry is on a roll, not just in producing the high-tech steel for the automotive industry, but in creating that future-focused, cutting-edge, clean, green, digital steel machine and operation of the 21st century. So let's talk to these experts and see where we are today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's great to have you on the panel. We've got a lot of questions, a lot of territory to cover. And first, let me acknowledge the obvious. For the first time, we have not just 1, but 2 women steel executives on our panel. It's about time. So let's be clear, folks. This is Exhibit A. This is not your grandfather's steel industry. We're going to explore some of that later in this program. Now, each of your companies had a good 2022, record years for some, and perhaps you will repeat that in 2023. But I want to start with a focus on the industry as a whole and essentially ask a question of each of you. The World Steel Association recently predicted demand for steel to rise 2.3% this year, but less so in the U.S., about half of that, because of recessionary pressures. A few years ago, I began asking panelists this opening question, so I want to do it again today. What's the one word that describes the state of the steel industry today? One word. Give me one word, and then we'll come back and give you 60 seconds to explain that one word. Barry, let's start with you. Barry Schneider, President, Chief Operating Officer, Steel Dynamics. What's that one word?
John, for me, that word would be courageous.
Courageous. Got it. Good. TRACI FORRESTER, Executive Vice President, Environment and Sustainability, Cleveland-Cliffs. What's that one word?
John, my word is misunderstood.
Misunderstood. Okay, good. Mike Williams, President and CEO, Timken Steel. What's that one word?
My word would be futuristic.
Futuristic. Okay. Sushma Walker, President, Business Technology at Nucor. What's that one word?
The word for us is evolving.
Evolving. Okay, good. And Rich FRUEHAUF, Senior Vice President, Chief Strategy and Sustainability, U.S. Steel.
John, my word is changing.
Changing. Okay, great. All right, we've got courageous, we've got misunderstood, we've got futuristic, we've got evolving, and we've got changing. So, Barry, let's start with you. Courageous, what is it about the steel industry? Why do you pick that word courageous?
Well, I think for myself and for SDI, being courageous is doing the hard thing. It's doing the thing that you're supposed to do. You know you should do it, but it's hard to do. And I think that starts with safety, being confident that, you know, your team needs you to be safe, your family needs you to be safe, all the way up to making good business decisions, all the way up to doing truly the right work to advance, you know, the goals of the company, the shareholders, the stakeholders. Do the right thing.
Got it. Great. TRACI, misunderstood. We're misunderstood in this industry? Tell us.
I don't necessarily think the folks in this room misunderstand our industry. I think it's the rest of the people. I find myself having to explain how well we are doing today, how clean we are making steel. The U.S. steel industry leads the global challenge on decarbonization. we have made great strides without the pressures being put on us.
Great, good. Mike, futuristic. Futuristic.
Sure. So my perspective is that this industry has innovated technology for its processes, its assets, and its people for generations. But if you look at the challenges facing the industry and the particular objectives the industry is setting for itself, there's going to have to be rapid innovation of technology for us to accomplish those goals. So I see the future bright, technology-driven, and an improvement to address those challenges that we face, whether it be manpower, decarbonization, safety, productivity, profit. So I think technology is going to lead the way for us.
Awesome, awesome, great. Sushma, I think your word was evolving.
Evolving. Yes, the steel industry has always evolved to meet the needs of the current issues. And we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about sustainability, right? But workforce has been evolving. We need to make sure that our teams are ready for how we make steel in the future in a much more clean way. And we'll continue to need to be a solutions provider, working closely with our customers and our partners to ensure that we don't just live in a very transactional world. Steel is the foundation of everything that we're doing. And we've got some great examples I'll share later.
Great, thank you very much. Changing, I think that's the word, Rich, you had changing.
Yeah, that's right, John. And I think maybe it's playing a little bit on what some of the other panelists have said, but I'm not a lifer in steel. I've been with U.S. Steel for about 8.5, coming up on 9 years. But even in that short span of time, the changes have been accelerating and huge. When I first started with U.S. Steel, we were fully integrated. Now, about a year from now, we'll probably have about half of our footprint more on the EAF mini mill side. The technology changes rapidly. Dr. Zeke, who's been my mentor, is out in the audience and used to teach me a little bit, some of which I still understand. But you think about the things we talk about now in steel, thin slab casting, the ability to make some of these high-end grades on an EAF mini mill route, direct reduced iron, hydrogen. Nobody was talking about that, or at least I don't remember anyone talking much about it 8 or 9 years ago. Maybe it was in a technical paper, but it wasn't common discussion among the industry. And now, I spend a lot of time with customers, with investors, with analysts. They want to talk about DRI. When are you going to do hydrogen? What products can you make through a thin slab casting route? So I think that the changes have been rapid and they're accelerating.
I guess I'm intrigued because so many of your words are very similar, but they're all very future focused, which is great. That's exactly the way it should be. Let me ask you, each of you, to react to what others have said. Do you agree with anyone in particular? Let's start with the misunderstood, because I love that concept, because I really think it's true, by the way. Do others feel the same way? Anybody?
I was going to say changing is an interesting word.
Yep.
28 years ago, I got to SDI with thin slab casting, and a lot of folks out here know what those thin slab casters will do. It's interesting that the world has a focus now because our sustainability footprint is so low that we have automotive people reaching to us to do solutions. So it's maybe that's more towards misunderstood.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Any other comments on each other?
Well, I would go along with the misunderstood, but more targeted to employees and employment challenges that we have. I think we need to figure out a way to make our industry cool again or cooler. And I think that's focused to be able to recruit and retain the top talent.
Yeah, we're going to come back to that because we want to talk about workforce development and the kind of talent we need in the mid-21st century. So good point, Mike. Yeah, go ahead, Tracy.
If I, excuse me, if I could add, I agree with changing, evolving. EAFs are more prevalent. EAFs make very clean steel. But I think the other part of my misunderstood concept is that iron is still necessary, and Cleveland-Cliffs remains very committed to the blast furnace route. We know that's what our customers demand. That's what we need. That's what we want. We need the advanced high-strength steels. Maybe someday all of them can be made in an EAF, but right now we remain committed to that, and that the iron, the metallics are necessary for that strength.
Well, I agree with that, but I also believe, in regards to the word I used, is there's going to be a significant reliance on innovation of technology to continue to keep that iron ore-based steel making prevalent, not only in the United States, but around the globe.
Sushma, did I see your hand up there? Go
You did. I'll tie back to this idea of being a solutions provider. Steel doesn't stand on its own. We touch a lot of other industries, and we need to make sure that we are looking at the holistic impact from a sustainability standpoint. Right at Nucor, we've just announced a joint collaboration with Johnson Controls, where we're taking almost 100% of their secondary steel, and we're salvaging that to turn it into low-embodied carbon steel. So those are the types of relationships and partnerships we need to continue to build on.
Well, thank you all for your one-word comment. I know that's a tough question to ask, but it's a great way to get started. And I think on a number of these topics, we're going to come back and address in a little more detail. Let me move on to the challenges to today's steel industry, because as you know, the manufacturing sector and indeed many parts of the economy are facing a lot of challenges right now. A couple of weeks ago, I read this statement about the steel industry, so let me share it with you. Quote, "The steel industry is facing a complex and challenging landscape in the years ahead. Only time will tell which predictions prove to be accurate, but it is clear that the industry will need to remain agile and adaptable in order to navigate these uncertain times." End of quote. So what are these challenges? Those threats to the steel industry today, existential or otherwise, what keeps you up at night? Not perhaps about your own companies, but perhaps about the steel industry as a whole. Tracy, why don't I start with you? I think to some extent you may have already touched on it with misinformation, as I recall, when we chatted, but carry on.
I would actually challenge...
Your mic is...
It's cutting out. Is that better?
That's better.
I would challenge the notion. I don't know that there is one existential threat to the steel industry. I think we're very resilient. We can flex. We have proven that over centuries. And you know, steel is the material of choice. It can be used in a variety of applications. As our economy evolves and changes, steel is needed. So I think we're in a good place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Rich, what do you think?
Well, I would say, John, I do think climate change is an existential threat. That is, in how the industry reacts to it. You know, I've sat in on some World Steel meetings. We have a footprint in Europe. And you know, the U.S. industry is better off versus some of the other parts of the world, the Chinese, the Indian, the CIS countries in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. But globally, the perception is, in this country and in Europe, that we are a major contributor to climate change. About 8% of greenhouse gas emissions come from steel making. Much reduced if you go the electric arc furnace route, which is, you know, the prevalent route here in the U.S. versus Europe. But there is a public perception, and you hear it when you talk to the investors, you hear it when you talk to the customers. And I think, and this is, I know we're going to talk about this later, when you talk to young people, one reason given, and this came out at World Steel as well, that we don't see more recruitment into the steel industry is the perception we're an old, dirty industry. We're not high tech. We're not part of the solution. I think we have to change that and talk to people. Yes, steel does emit a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, especially the integrated way, but if you move to electric arc furnaces, you use renewable power or nuclear power, you can really push down your carbon emissions. And by the way, you need steel as part of the solution. There are no electric motors, there are no electric vehicles without electrical steel. So you have to have steel as part of the solution. It's endlessly recyclable. We don't, as an industry, do a good job telling that story. And I think that's, to me, the threat, is if we don't start communicating better about how steel's part of the future, we're going to not get that talent we need to build the future.
Gotcha. Great points. Great points. Sushma, your thoughts in terms of challenges as we go forward.
Yeah, I'd add to what Rich talked about also, but the thing I think we always keep coming back to, and it's been an issue for years, is this idea of overcapacity. Right? Now add to that the need to be much more sustainable, and we can only control what's happening right here in our country. And we need to ensure that the policy continues to support that, because the rest of the world is going to continue, especially China, we continue to see this overabundance of steel made with lax or very little environmental regulations. This isn't just a United States problem.
Great. Good. Barry.
For sure, we have to be very diligent with our trade laws, because as the United States continues even further on our decarbonization journey, and already the United States leads the world. And the technology, just walking through the exhibit hall and seeing all these wonderful, almost 600 companies over there with this incredible technology, it's the cutting edge of everything that's going on. So we can't afford to let our trade laws let bad things sneak into the country. And I think we have to be very diligent that the Europeans as well will have to protect their economy while they make their transformation. So we're not asking for unfair things. We can't be a target while people are making massive investments in their assets here in the States.
And Mike, we'll give you the last word on this one.
Well, I mean, I agree with the other panelists on their various points of view. The thing that keeps me awake at night is global instability. And it's, whether it's a conflict physically or politically, I get concerned over the implications of that uncertainty on a global basis, its possible impacts to supply chains, and its ripple effect that it may have here in the United States. So I think there's a lot going on. There's a lot, most likely, that we don't know is going on. But that is the one thing that keeps me up at night. Just to tag on a couple of other points there in regards to able to recruit talent. I think I said earlier, we need to figure out a way, and of course, this association can help in that, is communicating how cool steel really is and how innovative. And as Barry said, go out there and you see the 600 vendors that are out there and the technology advancement that they're bringing into the industry. It's only going to have to accelerate from my perspective.
Good, great. These are all excellent comments. Let's amplify a little bit on some of this, if I can, on some of the challenges, and maybe get some of you to react with each other on some of this. Supply chain. Mike, you mentioned this a second ago. Have we fully recovered from the impact of COVID with respect to supply chain issues? And how important is reshoring to the future economies of your companies and of the steel industry as a whole? I don't know, Mike, you want to take that to start with?
I'm glad to take that one. I think we're still in recovery. I think we've come a long way. There still are erratic fluctuations in the supply chain, whether it be for our end customers or even, to the industry where, we've had to resource various microalloys because of the Russia situation. I think that's going to continue. The interesting about the onshoring is, yes, we're seeing onshoring, but it doesn't happen overnight. If you look at, the long products, the SBQ products that Timken Steel makes, that market size 10 years ago was probably around 8 million tons of SBQ. And today, it's around 4 to 4.5. And the industries respond properly to that, but that was primarily driven because of offshoring. And now, I think over the next decade, we're going to see those supply chain security requirements by industries that's going to bring some of that demand back. And naturally, the industry will respond to that.
Yeah, gotcha, good. Others want to, go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I think actually, the COVID supply chain issues are, I think, largely resolved. There may be a few bumps, and whether you want to call it Ukraine, Russia, there's an issue there in terms of pig iron supply, for example. That's not really COVID, but I actually think for the North American market, we're going to see a boom time. And I don't know how many of you follow some of the steel industry analysts, but one of them, the Citi analyst, Alex Hacking, put out an article or a paper, I think last month or the month earlier, and said, the decade from 2022 to 2030 will be the steel market of a lifetime for the United States. And his point is one I think we're seeing, the onshoring. I think the Wall Street Journal had an article recently about all of this new expansion in non-residential for manufacturing facilities coming back to the United States from China, from Asia. So a boom there. You see the emphasis with customers on supply chain security, right? Most of us on this panel can say we mine, melt, and make steel in the United States. You don't have to worry about an extended supply chain. For us, we've got iron ore here. Commodities are at an all-time high. We've seen record years the last couple of years for steel prices. In an inflationary environment, commodities are going to be in high demand. I think there was some conversation, some of the panels talk about trade. You know, this decoupling of the global trading system is going to emphasize regional trading, regional supply chains. You're seeing that. One thing that doesn't get a lot of talk about, but I think is fascinating, with the new USMCA rules, the rules of origin for what qualifies as USMCA, right, and not subject to tariffs, especially in the auto sector, change in 2027. And that's going to have a huge impact on some of the extended supply chains you see for the automotive sector, for the Asian suppliers trying to move steel into North America and finish it here. So I actually think we're going to see a great period of time for the steel industry over the next 8 to 10 years.
Great. Good. Barry, yeah, I saw your hand up.
I'd say we look at Mexico as a very, very strong growth opportunity. We've spent a lot of time over the last 6 years growing our base down there and acquiring metals recycling companies. It's very important to us to be with our customers down in Mexico because our customers are nearshoring to Mexico, and the infrastructure they're doing, the improvements are very nice. It's a very different setting if you haven't been to Mexico in the last 10 years. The manufacturing is very high tech, and what we found is that by locating and servicing our customer network throughout Mexico, putting our mills down south, our new Sinton, Texas mills very close to Mexico, we're trying to put the footprint where manufacturing's going. So it's very much an exciting time, and I agree with Rich. It's going to be kind of a boom time over the next 10 years, I think.
Sushma, let me ask you the same question, though. Are we past, when it comes to supply chain issues, are we past the COVID problems? Do we have new issues?
You know, I think TRACI touched on this earlier about the flexibility in our industry. Right? We've been able to adapt and evolve as we've needed to over the past couple of years, and I think we're going to continue to hit challenges head on. You know, there's not a better example of how we came through the pandemic as the steel industry, given where we're sitting today. So I think that's one of the great stories, isn't it, about us, and especially in this country. So I think I love the optimism, Rich. I think it's a great time to be right where we are.
Right. Tracy?
So I agree with a lot of what has been said. And Cliffs is uniquely situated because we're completely vertically integrated. Through COVID, we consolidated and became a steel company. So the mining is thriving. We also completed a $1 billion investment in Toledo with our DRI plant. So we're set with metallics. I do see a future where we are reshoring manufacturing. We're bringing manufacturing back to the forefront of all of the conversations. We need to keep doing that. I also think is going to take time, but as that happens, you're also going to start to bring back some of the, you're going to fill some of the voids that we have with the metallics. You're going to start having more of the scrap, prime scrap generated in this country. So a lot of good can come from it. Jobs number one. We're responsible in how we operate and make the steel and how it gets used. Yeah, future's bright.
I love the optimism, I really do. Let me go back to another one of the challenges, and I think, Mike, you mentioned this. Global instability is one of the challenges that the industry faces. I think some of you have touched on this, and you did as well. Is the Russian invasion of Ukraine, is that impacting your company or the steel industry in any particular way?
Yeah, I mean, it affected some of our raw material supply chain.
Still?
Yes. Yes. So, you know, we just had to reorganize and realign those supply chains, which we were successful in doing and will continue to be successful in doing. But yeah, there's an implication there. There's also some positive implications too, because, you know, Timken Steel, we're a very large armament producer of seamless mechanical tubing for a number of armament applications, and we've seen significant demand increase being driven by that conflict by the Department of Defense.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at that, and at some point, Ukraine's going to have to be rebuilt. And I don't know where that steel's going to come from, but who knows? Anyone else want to comment about it? Yeah, go ahead, Barry.
I would just say that the pig iron was definitely a big impact to the mini mills, the flat rolled mills. So our team very quickly reacted to the situation. Very fortunately, our Butler mill has our own iron plant, so we're self-sufficient at one of our 3 plants. But the world has a lot of products out there, and you know, we were quickly able to source a lot of different materials. I don't want to be you know, cold to the human losses that are happening in Ukraine and Russia, but that also disrupted a lot of semi-finished flow around the world. A lot of slabs moved from Russia and Ukraine that ended up in Europe and other places. So the world market's kind of been a little bit uneasy, which I think, again, is helped create that nice market we had the last couple of years.
Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we have a mill in Slovakia, in the eastern Slovakian region, or city of Košice. It's about 70 miles, 60 miles from the Ukrainian border. I mean, the humanitarian crisis shouldn't be underestimated. We had employees taking in Ukrainian refugees into their homes. Thankfully, things have stabilized. It affected the mill, I think, but you know, one of the things that I believe it did was highlight the importance of energy independence. I mean, if you look what happened in Europe, they put themselves in a position where they were way too beholden to Mr. Putin's gas supply. And that's one of the benefits and one of the reasons why I think North America has a bright future. We have the ability to be energy independent. We have lower priced electricity compared to other parts of the world. So I think, you know, the implications, and I think TRACI mentioned it too, those of us who have our own iron ore assets, we can make, and we're making 500,000 tons a year now of pig at our Gary facility, which we can then ship to our Big River mini mill. So that supply chain security, that independence of raw material supply, that energy security that we have in the U.S., I think is a huge advantage.
Good, good. Anybody else on the supply chain issue or the global instability? I'm going to move to 2 other challenges, I think, going forward. China. Where do you think we are with respect to China? Is it still one of the bigger threats or not? Mary.
Absolutely. I think you know, I don't know what the latest estimates are for production of steel in China, but it's somewhere over 1 billion tons a year. And they consume a lot of steel themselves, which is great. But where we have to be diligent is where it gets circumvented around and ends up through other countries getting processed. We also have to be very aware that products coming into the country made out of steel. Those are all avenues where, again, you know, the consumer wants something cheap, and if they're not educated on why American steel is so much cleaner than the rest of the world, and we know it's important to consumers. So we got to make sure we educate them on that, because a couple of pennies doesn't make that difference, but if China is unleashed in that kind of a predatory mercantile economy, tons is everything. The more tons they have, the more cost compression they have. So it's very important we keep diligent with them.
Yeah, go ahead.
I may, absolutely. I mean, Rich mentioned the importance of energy independence. Cleveland-Cliffs is currently the sole producer of electrical steels in this country. And just a few years ago, the Butler facility in Pennsylvania was slated to be shut down. We fought to keep it open. It's now our most profitable segment of the business, the electrical steels. Why would we let that production continue overseas and be at China's, well, let them grip that. We need to produce the electrical steels here. Cliffs is doing that. We've invested more money at our Zanesville plant, $30 million to get 30% more capacity for the nose, and it'll free up more GOES production at Butler. So we're taking action now to prepare for that.
Well, coupled sort of with this, the whole question of China, of course, is our government trade policy. So let me ask you about that, if I may, as one of our last challenges as we move forward. President Biden has maintained almost all of the Section 232 tariffs on imported steel. But let me just sort of ask, both with respect to that and anything else in the aggregate, what do you make of this administration's trade policies to date with respect to steel? Positive, not good enough, negative, what? Anybody? Rich, go ahead.
I would say extremely positive. You know, I think, first of all, as you pointed out, the Biden administration has maintained the 232. In fact, It was challenged at the World Trade Organization, was found to be contrary to the WTO rules, and to their credit, U.S. Trade Representative Tai and the rest of the administration came out and said, no, it's not, and we're not changing it. So I think they deserve a round of applause for that. The second thing is they implemented a 70% tariff on Russian pig iron imports, another good thing for the industry. And I think they have shown both on the trade side, and then if we talk about the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the opportunities there for the industry, they have been very pro-steel. And I think we should be very thankful that we've had two consecutive administrations that recognize the importance of steel. I think the one thing I'd say about China, the latest projections I saw from World Steel, for the first time in 25 years, the Chinese steel industry is projected not to grow. It's supposed to be flat. That's the projection.
Didn't they agree to cut 20?
Well, they cut. It's a game, right? It's a game with them. They cut the least efficient mills and then they build some new ones, right? But I think the reason I'm a little bit optimistic, back to why I think North America is in for boom times, we have, I think, unlike virtually any other political issue, and I happen to be responsible for government affairs at U.S. Steel as well, so I follow all of this, there's a bipartisan agreement. China is a problem, and I think on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, there is a consensus that we cannot trust the Chinese trade policy. We need to decouple our industry, get our manufacturing back in the United States, be self-sufficient, and I think you see that across both parties, and that is a huge win for our industry.
Yeah, great, good. Others on trade policy? Anybody? Yeah, Barry?
I totally agree that the administration keeping the 232 in place was very important, and the policy itself was a little bit sloppy. It's hard to administer, but it was immediate at the time we needed it most, and I've been glad that they haven't changed that. The recent Build Back Better, the CHIPS Act, these all were great avenues to get steel jobs out there. Some massive plants being built that are all steel consumed, and quite a bit of the renewable energy guidelines out there are for American-made steel. So not only the technology and the tracking systems that are a part of that, but the steel itself. So those are really good things. But at the same time, I do worry because the electric vehicle push is all supply chains outside the country. And that's very concerning to me. And I think that we really have to make sure we have good policy, not just something fast. And that's where I think bipartisan agreement has to happen. And how do we, in a sustainable way, use our own resources domestically to fulfill these needs?
Tracy might agree, but both of us, we actually make some electrical steel here, or will soon in the U.S., so it's not all outside the U.S.
We'll get to that in just a second. Give you a chance on that. Anybody else on trade policy?
I agree with what they've both said. The administration has been really good to work with steel. They listen, they want to support American, they want to bring back more manufacturing, they want to support steel, so agree 100%.
Excellent. Yeah, go ahead.
One other comment on that is, I think we're going to all be very much in agreement on that, right? But we have to continue to evolve. The trade laws have to evolve with how the threats continue to move as well, right? And Barry, you talked about that. And it does take every person in this room and outside this room to make sure that we are paying attention to what those laws are.
Right.
Pushing for that.
And as somebody who worked in the U.S. Congress for 14 years, you got to let your representatives and your senators know. And they really have to hear from everybody, not just the folks up on the stage. So that little editorial comment. Let's move on to the next topic, which is really green steel and the markets of the future. As we've discussed, today's steel industry is really not the industry of even 10 years ago, let alone 50 years ago. And part of the reason for that really is the development of new markets and the demand by customers, governments, shareholders for green steel, clean steel, climate neutral steel, decarbonized steel, whatever you want to label it. And part of that demand also comes from the requirements and billions of dollars from President Biden's Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, CHIPS Act, so many other bills that were the product of the last Congress. And they're just now beginning to hit the market. Each of your companies focuses a lot of time and effort on sustainability. In fact, two of you have that word in your titles here up on the stage, I would note. And at the same time, ESG issues environmental, social, and governance issues are getting more attention. I might point out that I noticed an article in Reuters recently that conservative state legislators have filed 99 bills in state legislatures to restrict the rise of ESG business practices, which I suspect put many companies between a rock and a hard place, in a difficult position. So, with all that as background, I want to begin with something this Motor City is very familiar with. And it obviously combines high-tech steel with public dollars and tax credits and ESG pressures for clean technology. And that, of course, is the development of electric vehicles. Before I move to the first question on this, I had just a quick thought last night when we were over with the panel at the first facility of the Ford Motor Company. So real quick, I'm going to ask each of you a quick question. Tell us what was the first car that you drove, that you had some control over, and maybe the first car that you purchased. I'll tell you mine in a second. But Rich, we'll just go right down the line. Do you remember the first car?
Yeah, it was a 1978 Ford Bronco my dad had. It was pretty beat up, so that's why I was allowed to drive it, 15, 16-year-old kid.
Good.
It was so old that the four-wheel drive, you had to go out and turn these little locks on the outside of the wheels to actually put it in four-wheel. I love that car, or truck.
I love it. Great. Sushma.
This is such not a cool question, So we had one family car, and it was a big boat of a Chevy Malibu, I think, blue, ugly. It was nothing on it that would even AM radio if we were lucky. That was about it.
Right, exactly. Barry, your first car.
66 Buick Skylark, and I think I spent more time under it than in it.
I can believe it. I love it. Tracy, first car.
Like Sushma, I drove the family truckster. It was a baby blue Oldsmobile station wagon with the wood panel siding and 8-track.
8-track. Love it. How about you, Mike?
Mine was a 1968 S10 Chevy pickup truck with 3 on the tree shifting.
Yeah, 3 on the tree, not 4 on the floor.
No, not 4 on the floor.
4 on the floor, 3 on the tree.
There were holes in the floor, so.
I can believe that too. My first car was actually my senior year in college. My grandmother she had stopped driving, so I drove an AMC 65 Rambler. Anybody remember those cars?
Oh,
65
yeah.
Rambler. And then I hate to admit this, but the very first car that I purchased was a Pacer. The aquarium on wheels. I thought it was a really cool car. I thought it would be great to sort of show off in. It was a total dud. It didn't work. So, well, the cars that each of these folks, and I think every one of us here, were first engaged with, they're so different from the electric vehicles of today. And I want to ask you a little bit about electric vehicles and the role of steel and your companies in each. S&P Global Mobility predicts that EVs could be 40% of all car sales by 2030. And obviously, there's some hurdles to that. The infrastructure bill is pumping $7.5 billion into charging stations, along with money to upgrade the nation's power grid, expand domestic battery production. There's tax credits up to $7,500 to purchase EVs. The Biden administration, a couple weeks ago, announced that as part of their sweeping climate agenda, they want new aggressive tailpipe emissions standards that will push people to buy EVs. And they believe that they can, once the regs are finalized, 67% of new sedan, crossover, SUV, and light trail purchases could be electric by 2032, 67%. And if you marvel at whether that could happen, you ought to note the New York Times on Monday had a front page story, perhaps some of you saw this, about Norway, which right now, last year, 80% of new car sales were electric vehicles. So, how is your company participating or planning to participate in this EV automotive market? TRACI, let's start with you.
Well, we are the largest flat-rolled steel producer in the country, and automotive, that's our #1 customer. So we currently serve the automotive manufacturers with the internal combustion engines, and we've been working with them for quite some time on what it takes to convert to the electric vehicle platform. Our steels are poised to serve you still need the advanced high-strength steels for the exposed body parts, the cage. We're working on developing the same strength, high-quality steels that are needed for the battery cage, because you want to protect that in the event of a crash. And we have all of the stainless steel and other important finishing. So, and then add to that, we have Butler and Zanesville. We have our MotorMax product, the non-oriented electrical steels, as well as the grain-oriented electrical steels that are needed for the grid that needs massive development in a very short time. We can produce those steels for the transformers to generate.
Can you meet what you anticipate is the growing demand over the next few years?
We are meeting the current demand.
Barely said. Barely said. Thank you very much, TRACI.
Sure.
Rich, let me ask you, I know earlier this year, U.S. Steel announced that your Big River Steel facility will start this summer to produce something called, is it Indux?
Indux.
Indux,
Yes.
a non-grain-oriented electric steel line. I think you mentioned it just a minute ago. Tell us exactly what you're up to.
Yeah, so I think, we certainly see the trend moving toward electric vehicles. I mean, we already participate, like Cliffs, U.S. Steel, we produce our XG3, our advanced high-strength steels to lightweight internal combustion engine vehicles, but also EVs. We see that market remaining for a long time as a strong market. But in addition to that, we see the opportunity with our non-grain-oriented electrical steel line, about 200,000 tons per year when it's at full run rate. Should be commissioned later this year. Progress has been excellent in getting that line up and running. And that NGO steel is absolutely essential for the electric motors that go into EVs. A lot of people pay attention, a lot of noise about the batteries. How do you get a battery? Well, if you have a more efficient motor, which will produce ultra thin gauge, non-grain oriented electrical steel, those motors will be more efficient. So we're tackling that, the range problem for EVs from the motor efficiency side. And so we've seen great response from customers for that NGO. And we remain bullish too on internal combustion engines. I think we're probably the only steel company up here that has a significant presence in oil and gas drilling. We have a whole segment for oil country tubular goods, tubular segment. It's doing great with all the drilling, the exporting of liquefied natural gas. So we're bullish on automotive, whether it's internal combustion engine or EV.
Yeah, I guess that was a sort of a related question, because I think some people think EVs are really very futuristic in this country, that it's not going to happen that quickly. And part of the reason, of course, is the charging stations. You've got to have those in place. And I noticed actually coming over from Pittsburgh, driving over here, that when you stop at those Ohio rest stops, they do have charging stations there. So, but it's a slow process. So the question of timing is important.
Yeah,
Barry,
I was going to say, we're spending a lot of time. We're a very large supplier to the automotive industry as well. We've been partnering with them, not just on solutions for steel. Recently we made an announcement we're going to be getting into the other metal to help take care of some of these needs. But on our metal side, OmniSource, we do a lot of recycling. And I would just tell you right now, there's no good way to recycle electric vehicles. The lithium batteries are pretty tough to handle. So we're investing time and technology to be able to get those cars and to recycle them. Because right now, as a vehicle, they're not very sustainable at all. The tires are very different because the cars are so heavy. And right now, there's no clean, efficient way to get those metals back out of those batteries. So we're spending a lot of our time researching that, a lot of good people out there working on it. But it almost feels like the cart before the horse in some regards, with regards to recycling, to the power generation, the materials to get these cars built that are outside of steel. The steel industry is already lightweighting. We're incredibly good at making good products, new products. for whatever the automotive demand is. But a lot of these other ancillary products just aren't ready yet. And I think the same with electrical steels. You know, for 25 years, people have talked about putting electrical steel mills in, and it's been a risk because the returns weren't there. And I think we're seeing sustainable, whether it's an electric vehicle or hybrid, there's going to be more motors in cars. There's going to be more motors in our lives. So I think that investment premise is on the edge right now for a lot of people are probably contemplating something similar.
Yeah, good points, good points. Mike and Sushma.
Sure.
Sushma, go ahead.
Yeah, Nucor's been investing in this for over a decade, right? We've had $15 billion of investments, including our Hickman plant. We just started producing it on our galv line there, and our West Virginia plant will also be capable of the advanced high-strength steels needed for this market. You know, we'll keep coming back to we need clean steel to ensure that the grid and our infrastructure can support where all of this is going from the recycling all the way through.
Good, very good. Mike, any thoughts on this one?
Sure. So at Tiffin Steel, the automotive business represents about 40 to 45% of our total sales. We're heavily invested in the ICE engines of yesterday, pretty much cranks, transmissions, wheel hubs, et cetera. But we're also pursuing the EV platform. So we've been awarded just over 20 different vehicle platforms where we are actually taking our SBQ. We also have a machine components division, and we are machining the rotor shafts that go into all those motors. So depending on the platform, whether it's a 1 electric motor, 2 electric motor, 4 electric motor, and as you get into the heavier platforms, they're putting small transmissions on each of those motors. So from our perspective, we're really happy when you got a nice ICE demand and you're going to build out this EV demand over the next 20 years. We think that's very positive. I'm not quite sure that it's going to go as fast as we see some of the estimates.
Yeah.
For some of the reasons that you said, but some of those reasons go all the way back to the supply chain to the mine and the capacity of those rare earth minerals that they need to make those batteries. I think it's going to take a little bit more time than they think. I think it's good for us because I think hybrids are going to become more prominent as the EV platforms build out over the next decade. I think that sets us up pretty good as an SBQ producer with a focus on the automotive industry.
And I think, as some of you have already stated, one of the very important questions is this ought to be a market in the U.S., onshored here in the U.S., and the question of how quickly that can happen is another one. So thank you. If you have any other comments on this, feel free to on electric vehicles. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. Because the other topic, they're all related, of course. At our last town hall a year ago, we spent a lot of time talking about decarbonization. And I know it's an important topic, and it's one that will come up, no doubt, in other future town hall meetings. I don't want to get too repetitive, but as you know, sustainability, really the demands of sustainability extend to both Scope 1 emissions, those are the ones from your plants and operations directly under your control, Scope 2, emissions from your power sources, like local electricity and natural gas, and Scope 3, emissions from everything else, really, those who transport to you and to and from your facilities and your suppliers domestically and overseas. So here's the question. First, how is your company leveraging renewables and/or nuclear energy as a raw material and as a Scope 2 power source? And then secondly, how are renewables or nuclear energy a growth market for your company? TRACI, on Monday, Cliffs announced that it had successfully completed a successful hydrogen injection trial using hydrogen as a partial substitute for coke at a blast furnace. Tell us more about what's going on here.
Sure. We're very proud to announce that we had a successful trial at our number 3 blast furnace at Middletown Works in Ohio. We blended hydrogen with the natural gas. So we're already an industry leader in the use of natural gas in our blast furnaces and the use of the HBI from our DR plant in Toledo. That combination, along with our pellets, is already reducing coke rates. The idea with blending the hydrogen with the natural gas in all 20 tuyeres of the number 3 blast furnace was just to test the viability. Very happy that we didn't launch any rockets. We had a very stable operation and product quality. So it was the first step in what I imagine to be a long trial. We're very excited about the possibility of using hydrogen to further cut down our coke rate. We'll never be able to eradicate the use of coke in the blast furnace, we know that, but we're doing our best to work those emissions down.
I think when you and I chatted, you said that we simply cannot be reliant on renewables right now.
Right, they don't run 24/7, and we don't have sufficient battery storage to run a steel mill or even an EAF around the clock on renewables.
Good, good. Others? Barry, go ahead.
I'd say the reliability of the grid is a major concern I have as we start adopting more renewables.
Yeah.
They're great to have out there. We're a great supplier. The solar fields all have a lot of our steel, both our small beams from West Virginia that hold them up. The tubing is heavy gauge galvanized we make. So it's a great industry to supply to. It's great to have on the grid, but the concern is always, what do we do when something changes in renewables? And what we've seen is a lot of other companies have adopted policies where they've gone where it's easy to do renewables, put solar farms in Texas, wind farms in Illinois. We are very focused on making sure that our renewable portfolio is where we consume our power. Many of our communities are going to have an opportunity to get renewables because a big user like a steel mill, like us, SDI, will buy that power, will be the financial reason that renewable power gets built. So it's a very calculated effort we're doing. We're trying to impact all the grids that we do business on, the PJM, the MISO, TVA, ERCOT, and we're big advocates of nuclear. I really believe nuclear energy has to be part of the future. We have to do it safely, but we need something that's reliable, that we can augment and take care of base loads, and then be able to exploit as much of the renewables as possible. So we're very fortunate right now. We do have a very strong nuclear portfolio. All of our Texas power is nuclear. The vast majority of our Indiana power is nuclear, and a good portion of the TVA power is nuclear. So we actually have a very low carbon footprint from our scope 2, and it wasn't by design. It was fortunate, I'm not going to lie, but we're taking it to the next level right now.
Well, that's part of that regional approach that's needed for good sustainable operations. You have to take advantage of what you have available to you. So at Cliffs, we're also taking a very similar approach on renewables, where we want it to be additive to the grid. We want it to be close to where we live and work. It has to make sense. So we have been supportive and have signed some virtual power purchase agreements. We're supporting the utilities. We're pushing the utilities to do better, quite honestly. That's what we need.
Yeah, it seems like both of you have identified another challenge that we could have mentioned in a previous segment, which is the grid, and that you and others in the steel industry are worried about the grid. We could dwell more on that, and if anybody wants to talk about it, we'll do that. But I wanted to, something else, Barry, that you mentioned, which was nuclear. And I wanted to turn to Sushma because, if I understand correctly, Nucor has invested in something called NuScale.
Yes.
Which is a small nuclear reactors that are right on site.
Absolutely. That's similar to what Barry talked about. We do feel like, we believe that's going to be a game changer as that technology comes to fruition. And, you know, there's going to be a continued multi-prong approach needed for renewables. We can't, I mean, no one up here has just said it's the one thread, right? Everybody is looking for multiple ways to hit this. And we do feel like, once more, this is not just a problem right here in the United States. We're committed to this globally, so much so we're the only industrial company that signed on for the UN's Global Compact, carbon free, and it's going to take those many approaches to continue to do that. We're excited about our partnership with NuScale and think that's got a lot of change efforts coming our way.
So essentially, so I can understand, all can understand, are we talking about putting in place small nuclear reactors at facilities, at steelmaking facilities? Is that your future goal?
Yes, so the way that the technology around that is the small modularity around these, so we can have the growth as it's needed.
Great, good. And I know you're doing other things in terms of wind towers as well, right?
We are. So the question that you framed up really two parts, right? One was what we're doing in renewables, and then the second is as a growth market. So we've just started up operations at our plate mill in Brandenburg, Kentucky, and I'm really excited about this because it's one of the only handful of mills in the world, and the only one in North America that's capable of producing the heavy gauge plate at scale needed for offshore wind, as well as the monopile foundation to support it. So we've talked a lot about having our own independence. That's a great way in terms of reducing the dependence for bringing steel into the country.
Right. Great, great. Who hasn't taught you? Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, so first on sustainability, I have a really clunky title, Chief Strategy and Sustainability Officer. I can't say it most of the time anyway, but you know, I think you mentioned before these laws in some states. Legislatures can do what they want to do, but the customers and the suppliers and the employees and the investors want to see further decarbonization of the industry. So I think that's going to happen. That ship has sailed. When you talk about, I spent, actually before I came to US Steel, I spent 6 years at Westinghouse Electric in the nuclear industry. So I'm extremely pro-nuclear, and I think that is part of the solution. I don't get real excited about small modular reactors because you got to have the Nuclear Regulatory Commission license those, and they don't do anything fast. But nuclear should be part of the solution. But I think renewables are really picking up steam. At our Big River complex in Arkansas, we will be the largest electricity customer of the whole Entergy company, not just Entergy Arkansas, when Big River 2 comes online. Well, about 6 million tons of flat-rolled, low-carbon emission steel. And we're also going to have a lot of renewable. Entergy is a great partner. They're procured the solar field, 250 megawatts, that will help supply Big River. And I think that's important because there are some customers, especially German customers, who have misgivings about nuclear power. So the ability to say to them, we've got renewables, not just nuclear. If you want a low-carbon product like our Verdict steels, 25% as much greenhouse gas emissions per ton, that's important. I think the grid build-out is important, and we're seeing, like some of the other panelists, increasing demand from solar customers, wind customers. But I do think, as well, you can't downplay the importance of renewable and nuclear to the decarbonization of the industry.
Great, good, all good comments. Mike.
Sure, John. So the renewable end market is a valuable market to Timken Steel. As Barry said, we make the steel rods that rotate the solar panels to follow the sun. We also make all the bearing steels that go into the turbines. That's a big market for us. And we've recently developed new applications for our SBQ for deep water bolting applications for offshore windmills. And as that continues to build out, we see great demand in that market, and we're prepared to serve it. In regards to where, we're located in northeastern Ohio. On that grid, there's only 5% renewable on that, and that's what Timken Steel's captive to. As others have said, we have to work with the energy producers to build out more renewable into the grids while also updating the infrastructure of the grids to ensure the reliability of the delivery of power to our assets. Similar to what Rich said, I'm not scared of nuclear. I don't think we should be scared of nuclear. I think nuclear should be a part of the energy portfolio. It's the cheapest. It's also the most greenest if you manage it properly and safely. And I think that the future of all this electrical demand that is going to evidently come from every citizen in the United States we're going to have to go nuclear and build out those reliable grids.
I think you may, go ahead, Tracy.
If I may layer on to that, in Ohio, you're absolutely right, Mike. We just don't have the options. But we do have 2 nuclear power plants along Lake Erie, And Cliffs is tapped in with the hydrogen hub activity that's been generated by the federal funds made available. And we've chosen nuclear as the hub that we're a core member of. So the idea is to tap into the existing nuclear facilities. They've made capacity available. We'll use electrolysis or some form to generate the hydrogen right there at the nuclear power plant and then pipe it into our Toledo plant. I'm hopeful that that comes about. The application is pending. So again, we believe in nuclear as well and want to see more.
That's fascinating because I don't know that I've ever heard a whole lot of talk about nuclear and steel, but we're hearing it today. That's awesome. And I do think your point, I think all of you, but particularly Mike Tracy, you pointed to the fact that we can't really control where the electricity that we use in our homes and factories come from because we're not the power companies. Unless you do your own power supply, we're really relying on whatever it is here in Michigan or Ohio or Pennsylvania or Alabama, wherever you are, right?
So at Cliffs, at most of our integrated mills, we are generating our own power.
Yeah.
And we do that for stability as well.
And that's about the only way you can get out from under a non-renewable source of power. So great, good discussion. Let me move on again with respect to this. As American steel, and perhaps others, but as American steel becomes cleaner and greener, the question is really, how do we reward those companies that have reduced their carbon footprint? Or put another way, how do we keep dirty steel from other countries, China, and others from getting or taking advantage of the fact that we're producing steel cleaner here in the US? And that's where this whole concept of the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM, comes in. Now, last December, the European Union adopted CBAM to take effect in 2026, with reporting requirements starting this October. And CBAM in Europe will apply to 5 industries, including steel. And the whole idea is to level the carbon costs through the purchase of CBAM certificates. It gets somewhat complicated. And maybe that's the question. Do you believe CBAM is necessary in the United States? What should it look like? And what kind of certificating method should we use to determine reduced carbon emissions in steel? Anybody want to take that before I just pick on one of you?
I'll take it, John.
Go ahead, Rich.
Because we have a facility in Europe, so we're very familiar, right? We're in the EU already in Slovakia. The reason they're putting CBAM in place is because for many years they've had a carbon tax on the European domestic steel industry, right? So our facility and all the European steel makers have to buy carbon credits. There's a market where it gets traded. So they get taxed as it is already on carbon emissions. So the idea of CBAM was to say, well, you can't have, let's pick on Russians, right? Russian steel that's made outside this domestic tax system, imported in at lower cost into Europe, but not, so the CBAM is to adjust to make it fair on the European domestic steel makers by making imports into Europe have to pay the same carbon tax. So we don't have that in the US. I'm not sure you need a CBAM per se. I actually think, the market will reward the companies that invest in lowering their carbon emissions, whether it's customers, a number of us have green steel products that we sell. Ours is Verdex. Customers reward it. That's what they're looking for. When across the street here, Ms. Barra wants to green her supply chain. Who does she come talk to? She comes and talks to all of us. Says you need to lower your carbon footprint. So I think the market and investors reward the companies that lower their carbon footprint. And that's why we announced a supply agreement with GM for our Verdex brand back in February.
So no CBAM is necessary.
I think you have to make sure that you don't get dumped Chinese steel in. But if you have a CBAM, you have to be careful because the next thing that comes after that's a domestic carbon tax.
Interesting. Sushma.
So I'll add to that. If the U.S. does adopt any type of tax around this, or if there's any type of regulation, I do think you have to have mechanisms at the border to address it. Otherwise, we're going to be dealing with the same things that the Europeans did. So from my standpoint, if there is regulation, we need to make sure that we have that border adjustment in place. And I do think that our consumers and customers will reward us. We've been awarded GM Supplier of the Year 5 years in a row, and we have been supplying to them in this net zero Econic steel. It's the only net zero steel made at scale. So it's already happening. We're getting those partnerships because of that, but let's not forget, if there's any change in regulations, we've got to make sure that we adjust to that as well.
Others? Yeah, I totally agree. We're earning business every day because of our low carbon footprint, because of our renewable approach. We talked about branding a product, but we're so low, we said, well, it's already really low. If we just educate our customers on what they're getting from us, they're really happy most of the time. I think the process itself should be pretty straightforward. Europe has made it pretty complicated with the CBAM, and I don't know how the reporting's going to go with that. It does seem very burdensome. So I do believe, to Sushma's point, that we have to have a watch at the border to make sure these products don't sneak in under false pretenses. But we also have to understand what's really important is the carbon, not how much you reduce it, not where you were yesterday, not where you promised to be in 10 years, 20 years. It's where is it today? And we're at the point now where we can all have really good ideas of where our Scope 1, our Scope 2, and our Scope 3 emissions are. So we're already offering very different products to different customer types who ask for these products. So the marketplace will respond, but at the same time, people will take advantage of us if we don't have some kind of security mechanism at the border.
Right, I'm just going to keep going down the line. Tracy.
Agreed. We need some sort of border adjustment mechanism. I don't think a price on carbon is a solution or good for us. And like what Barry was just saying, Cliffs doesn't. We don't need a marketing label for our steels. We have shown through our sustainability reporting over the last 3 years, we're more than 25% down from our 2017 base level. So all the steels we're producing, we're driving the emissions down. That's just who we are. That's what we're striving to do. And we're going to continue on that journey. But I do think that with all of the investments Cliffs has made and the fellow steelmakers up here have made, we should not be penalized at the border. We need some protection.
Gotcha. Mike, last thoughts on this one?
Sure. At Timken Steel, about 20% of our annual CapEx is focused on sustainability projects, and that will continue. We just recently published our second sustainability report. We're very proud of that. We're proud of the progress. In regards to the CBAM, that is a very complex issue, and it's probably a little bit beyond my bandwidth from an intellectual standpoint. But the one thing I will comment, it can't be just steel. It has to be anything with steel content. Because as we all have learned over the years, they'll figure out a way to get it across the border somehow, some way. So I think it's yet to be determined. And I agree with the rest of the panel. Let us compete in the green steel space.
Good, great comments. I think maybe it's a good thing that Europe is doing this so we can see from their experience what it might mean for us to do it. Obviously, on our level, it is complicated. I tried to figure it out. I read a lot of those regs, and I still don't think I understand much about it. It is complicated, and it definitely is regulation, and it's government, and that always worries you. So, well, thank you all, folks, for your conversations on that. I want to move to another topic, one that's always important to the steel industry, and that is safety. And just want to do a quick review before we move on to the workforce issue, which will be our last issue before we go to Q&A. So safety. You know, the steel industry has had its share of health and safety issues, no question about it. But the good news is that the steel industry, as others have said, has always taken safety in the workplace first, and it has basically insisted on safety not only for itself, but for those who deal with the steel industry, its suppliers. Given the high-tech nature of steel these days, our question is really pretty straightforward, and that is, how is your company using smart technologies today to reduce your injuries and enhance your safety? We're going to go right to that question, but I just saw something this week in a newspaper from Cleveland Cliffs, so I wanted to ask TRACI about this because I thought it was interesting. A week ago, your CEO, Lorenzo Gonsalves, who's been a frequent panelist, I might add, was at a steelworkers event in Indiana, where he noted that Cliffs has boosted employment from roughly 20,000 to 27,000 based on the acquisitions that you have made. And I want to quote him directly because this relates to safety. He said to the steelworkers, quote, "All the assets we acquired were all understaffed. They promoted practices like forcing people to work long hours, having people step up to work 12-hour, 14-hour, 16-hour shifts is a recipe for disaster. After 12 hours, your brain is gone. You're no longer giving your 100%. It only takes 10 seconds to be killed," unquote. Typical Lorenzo Gonsalves, if you know him. Very straightforward comment. This is not really high-tech stuff, and I want to get into the high-tech stuff, but this is pretty basic.
That's right. I would say the most important thing that we've done is gone back to the basics. And as we integrated the four companies, if you add Ferris Processing as well, we've capped the shifts at 12 hours. It's just the smart thing to do. And the mills were grossly understaffed, so we added 7,000 employees at a time that you would normally imagine synergies to be recognized and making cuts. We didn't. We grew to make sure we were safely staffed. And we're also staffing in a way that, you know, I think Lorenzo may have in those same remarks said that you have an adult training the rookie. We want to train the next generation of steelmakers as well and do it safely and smartly. But it is about going back to the basics and taking the time to teach them, you know, how to properly work from heights, how to assess ergonomics. AI is great to assess ergonomics, but the human brain's pretty good too. And if it doesn't feel right, stop what you're doing, step back, assess the situation. If you leave a job and you return to the job, take 5 to figure out if anything has changed before you commence that work. So it really has been about going back to the basics.
Yeah, I like that, back to the basics. So now let me take you a step forward. Are there smart technologies? Are there new things? We are automating a lot more. Are there things that make the industry safer today that you're utilizing? And then, of course, we'll open this up to everybody.
Sure. This is not my area of expertise, but I do know that we're using some AI in terms of assessing ergonomics and, you know, keeping people safe, having them working in proper position, and developing tools. That's something I think this industry has been very innovative over the centuries in developing tools to do the job safely. So AI will help with that. I think we also are using wearable devices to protect people from preventing heat exhaustion and assessing things like that. Look, we're using a lot more robots. We're using the control rooms it's all digital. So, you know, I almost equate it to the video games that my boys play. I mean, it's all digitally controlled. So to the extent we can do that and be smart and collect the data and then run the analytics on it too, it makes all of this be smarter.
Thank you very much, TRACI. Sushma, Nucor in its 2022 annual report said it achieved its safest year in company history. So what's the key?
Yeah, it's culture. Safety is a core value, right? It is what all of us show up and do every single day. It's not just something that we talk about. It is absolutely living the culture. And I've got great teammates out here today that will tell you it's not just words. I loved what you said, TRACI. It's back to the basics, right? It starts with your behavior and how you show up every single day. The technology will always continue to help augment, and we don't want to, we want to do everything we can from an engineering standpoint to ensure that we've got the right processes and the right equipment and capabilities to help with that. But man, if it's not here and it doesn't start with everything, no amount of safeguards is going to replace that. And so I'm so proud. You know, this team shows up every single day to not just take care of themselves, but to take care of each other and for the families that they provide for day in and day out. It's just a great story to tell.
It is a good story to tell.
Yeah.
And Rich, at U.S. Steel, you've also, your days away from work declined in this last year. Another success record. How are you reducing your injuries?
I think it is culture, and I think the key element for the culture is tone at the top. If your leaders don't make safety a priority, then the people who report to them don't make it as much of a priority as they should. So every meeting, we start with a safety briefing. Our CEO is laser focused. He's a member on the board of directors of the National Safety Council. You know, we coined the phrase safety first 110 years ago, and we make it a
110 years ago, we
1908, I believe, yes. And so, you know, it's how we live. It's our #1 core value. It's something we talk about regularly every week in our senior leadership team meeting. The first thing we talk about are safety performance, any incidents. We run campaigns to keep it top of mind. So we try to give the workforce kind of like a tagline, like, you know, spring into summer, right? A little tagline. It's like, and then it's focus on hydration, right? What's one of the biggest issues in the summer? Hydration, 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 right? It's hot out there in the middle, especially if you're in the South. Are people staying focused on their hydration? If you don't stay hydrated, you get dizzy, you get lightheaded, you get distracted, and bad things happen. Somebody mentioned, you know, fall from heights. You just have to be constantly on top of, are you using the safety devices, are you using the lanyards? And I think the area we've really upped our game, but it's an area for continued focus. It's not just our employees, it's the contractors. We've got $4 billion of projects underway at Big River. We've got thousands of contractors on site. And our CEO will talk to their CEO if we see bad safety performance from the contractors. You've got to make it the #1 priority.
Yeah, I know from previous panels, we've had suppliers who will, companies that will bar suppliers from their property if there's safety issues. I assume you would all do the same.
Immediately.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Barry, Steel Dynamics cut nearly in half its lost time injury rate from 2021.
I think Sushma said it very well. It's the culture. And what we've done is we've asked our supervisors to take a step back from production and be that coach, be that having courageous conversations with people, take control of safety, be out there with our folks, having the discussions, informing them, teaching them, educating them all the time. We are also very interested in technology helping the process. There are a lot of tools that are available. And one of our melt shops, Columbia City, is trying to get to no person on the deck so that we can actually have a lot of robotic stuff. And I would just tell you, while I support these activities, I think we have to be really aware that when the technology, we're in the boundary condition of technology, when a sensor maybe not lined up, when something's not quite right, when the person has to go in there again, we have to really talk about those moments. We have automatic cranes at our Sinton facility that Morgan supplied. And we probably spent 3 weeks talking about when we interact with this machine. When it runs, it just does its thing. It's phenomenal. But there's times we have to maintain, we have to work with it. How do we do that safely? And I think that's with technology, we have to be very aware that it's not going to be perfect. You know, they talk about self-driving cars. 99.99% of the time, they're going to be great. In Chicago, you're going to drive by 10,000 cars. It's not all right that one of them's not good. So how do we ensure these things are safe? How do we work with this technology? And this is the place. This is the common ground of the technology. We had 100 people come up here to the show this week, and they're all looking at safety features that are available, and not just specific safety features at the show, but how the equipment works, how the equipment's evolved to be safer for our teams to work on it. That's a good reason to invest in new equipment, because it's safer for us.
Great. Mike, to your credit, you have been very upfront in acknowledging a fatality at Timken Steel last year. But as a result, you've introduced a new safety training program. You've embarked on a $7 million safety effort, including an annual incentive plan, I believe. Can you tell us more about what you're doing at Timken Steel?
Sure. So, you know, we've been challenged from a safety perspective. We're modernizing our safety program with a heavy emphasis on training. increasing the amount of machine guarding, reducing the man-machine interface. And we also have some really cool projects that are going on that are leveraging the AI technology combined with camera technology to monitor processes, even up to inside the EAF, and collecting hundreds of thousands of data points, both looking back, looking current, and predicting what's going to go forward, looking for upset process conditions that may occur, and taking action prior to that prediction coming true. We are going to continue to invest almost 20% of our CapEx project, our CapEx budget on safety opportunities. There's a number of them available, but I also agree with TRACI, the people focus is absolutely critical. Limiting the amount of overtime, putting in technology. If you have a lone worker that has to do work in an isolated area by themselves, that you equip them with technology so you're able to monitor their movement, monitor their biorhythms, and things like that while they're there. The technology will continue to innovate, and it's just going to drive a much safer work environment, particularly at Timken Steel.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all, and thank you for the work that you're doing in the safety arena. I think it's the overall safety record in the American steel industry is pretty phenomenal compared particularly to some overseas. So thank you for all that you're doing. Our last major topic before we go to your predictions on the future and then questions and answers from Ron or questions from Ron and George. You're going to give the answers from all of you folks. And I know you see townhall@aist.org. Be sure to send your questions in. We want to talk about workforce development in the mid-21st century. You know, as I was researching this topic, I wanted to know how many people work in the steel industry. And I got a plethora of answers, you know, from 80,000 people to 130,000. I was thinking maybe I should go on ChatGPT and see what they have to say. I didn't do that. But maybe that's where I have to find the answer. So it almost doesn't matter, and it certainly a lot depends on how you define steel making exactly. I think a couple of things are obvious, though, in 2023. This is a changing industry. Among our panelists, as I've noted, are 2 women, steel executives. We also have 2 lawyers, I believe, on the panel. And I believe only 2 of you are engineers, if I'm correct. All of you are younger than many of the panelists that we've had in the past. I will say that. I know that to be true. And last year I did a little audience participation, so I'm gonna do that again today before I go into some direct questions to you. I want the audience and also the panelists to raise your hands in response to this simple question. I'll do the same. How many of you are baby boomers born in 1964 or earlier? Baby boomers. How many of you are Gen Xers born in 1965 through 1980? How many of you are millennials born in 1981 through 1996? Oh, we got a lot of you folks. A lot. Now, are there any Gen Zers born in 1997 or later? Raise your hands high. Hey, we got a few of you.
All right.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it's obviously millennials and Gen Zers. Raise your hand. These are the under 40 crowd. And there are a lot of you here. And that's a great sign of what's going on in the steel industry today. It's no longer a working place for just old or older males. And it cannot be if it wishes to survive. So a couple things are true. Making steel today requires different skills from even a decade or so ago. And as companies like Microsoft and Google lay off thousands of these high-tech workers, is there a place for them in your steel companies? How are you recruiting them, including women? And what are, you know, I guess, how do you come up against the challenge that there's a perception that this is an old male-dominated industry? So to start off, I think it's only fair that I go to one of our women. So Sushma, you want to tackle this one first?
Sure. I am so excited to talk about this topic.
Great.
I was actually at Microsoft's headquarters a couple of weeks ago, and you know, it's interesting as you start hearing about they're laying off all these people. One of the statistics that they shared with me is, as we work towards a more sustainable world, the types of roles that will be needed over the next 30 years, we're going to need 18 million jobs, and 16 of those don't exist today, right? So we have to use every resource we've got to make sure that we're filling those roles. So as those companies are laying off people, if you're affected by that and you're bright and capable, come talk to us. We've got tons of opportunity, right? We've got so much going on from a sustainability standpoint, technology standpoint. As I walked around some of the vendors yesterday, how much we're seeing from information technology and operational technology converging, you're really starting to see just the tip of where I think we're going to go from AI to machine learning. And we also see, I think there were 400 papers that were presented here this week, right? We aren't done learning and growing as a steel industry. So it is going to take different thinking. We don't make steel the way we did 15, 20 years ago. It's taking more technology focus as we're continuing to grow, not just our youth that we're bringing into our companies, but also those that several of us, thanks for saying we're all young up here, by the way. So
it's true.
It's gonna,
I don't
we
think
all
there are
have to
baby boomers
keep,
up there.
right, all of us up here have to keep evolving and adapting our skill sets to grow as well. So I think this is a great time to be a part of the steel industry. I think the opportunities, we're just starting to scratch the surface.
So is the steel industry a place for women?
Absolutely.
And how are you attracting them to Nucor?
I think, you know, again, my background is IT, so there is no physical restraint on that. Come join us. And it's some of the coolest work you'll ever do. So you've got great people to work with, and the technology, I think, is just going to go past anything we're going to see in the next 2 to 3 years. So be a part of that right up front.
Great. Tracy.
Yes, women have a place in steel, without a doubt. There's still a smaller percentage of the total employee base at Cliffs, but we have some good programs. You know, another area that we focused is veterans. We're looking to attract and recruit veterans, and we're forming business resource groups for veterans, as well as a women's business resource group is in its nascent stages at Cliffs. We partner with the unions on you know, attracting trade and training up the trades that are desperately needed. There's plenty of room for college-educated and then some engineers, and, you know, electrical, chemical, you name it. We need the engineers, but we also need the skilled trades. And I'm very proud to say that the total median income at Cliffs across the entire footprint, across 27,000 people, is $132,000 a year. If we cannot,
130, that's with benefits.
Yes, that's all included. But we should be able to attract the best and brightest into the steel industry and give them really challenging and meaningful work. That's what it's about.
And certainly compensation is
compensation.
One way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Gentlemen, I hesitate to ask how you're attracting women, but I have to be careful. Be careful how I ask that question. But as employees in your company, high tech, how important is that? Obviously across all genders and other forms of diversity within your community. Rich, tell us more about what U.S. Steel is doing.
Sure. So it is important, and we have a number of tools in our toolkit to do this and to increase our inclusivity. First, we publish a DE&I report, and we'll do that again this year. So, you know, prospective employees can see how we're doing. We can hold ourselves accountable to, are we improving the representation within our company of a more diverse workforce. We also have, think of it as sort of like a Rooney Rule for football fans. You know, when we look at open positions for senior or managerial positions, you have to make sure you have a diverse candidate pool when you're interviewing. So we're doing things that way. I would say on kind of a more less quantitative approach, we have affinity groups. We call them employee resource groups. We have one focused just on women. We have one for DE&I, more broadly defined DE&I groups, to make sure that the employees are getting mentorship, they have the ability to communicate what are the challenges. And actually, we just have a quarterly DE&I report out just yesterday to our senior leadership team, where the leaders of these affinity groups talk to the CEO, the CFO, the general counsel, me, and other senior leaders. What's working, what's not working, what can we do to improve representation, but also employee engagement. And I'll come back to sustainability. We have an employee resource group on sustainability because what we found are the younger employees are looking for purpose in their work. It's, you know, it's important to earn a paycheck, but they also want to have a purpose. They want to feel like their work is valuable and appreciated. The communication issue or the perception issue TRACI talked about. And so, you know, talking to them about what we're doing in sustainability, what we're doing in community engagement, those are things we're doing to try to attract the talent that we need in this industry.
You know, you said something, and maybe Barry, you could comment on this if I was struck by the number of awards that this association gives to a number of people. Those recipients of those awards so often talk about their mentors in the industry. And mentorship, I think, is always important in just about every walk of life. But in the steel industry, it seems that it's front and center. Is that true, Barry?
Absolutely. I think everybody in this room has mentors. I was really fortunate when I got out of engineering school. I really didn't know much to work at a steel mill. So I had an early mechanical boss, Larry Traxler, who he proceeded to let me know what I didn't know and got me help in understanding how to use tools and do a job I was hired for. But that same mentorship goes on today, and it's across the organizations. I would tell you, as we look at our workforce, the engineers interacting on the floor with our people is so important because they're just learning. They're trying to learn and get as much as they can. They interact with our salespeople. Our salespeople are the voice of the customer coming back. So it's amazing when our people on the floor say, hey, can we get Lori Hahn from Chicago in to tell us what's going on up there? Those are important opinions coming back to help them do their jobs every day. So these mentorships is not as much, you know, the day-to-day apprenticeship type thing. It's really being exposed to leadership. And of all the things I look for when we're hiring a workforce, you know, we need leaders. We need people that come in that are challenging the status quo, that are engaging in their teams, they're engaging in their lives and their careers. And that's a hard thing to do. It's a really hard thing to do remotely. So I know a lot of younger folks want to work at home and do all these things. The teamwork that SDI is, it's essential that we're here, that we're participating with each other, we're engaging each other every day. And that doesn't mean we're always working. It means we're engaged with each other in their lives. We wish people well. We have, you know, we tell jokes, all that stuff too. But we're there when things are happening. We support each other. So those mentorships are important to us in every aspect of our life. The closer you are as a team, the more important that is.
Mike, when we saw the hands go up for those in the millennials and the Gen Zers, these are folks born in the 1980s and 1990s. They're the future of the steel industry. How do you get them to work at Timken Steel?
Well, you have to have a competitive benefits package and salary.
Right.
But how we do it is we bring them in and we show them, we take them through our facilities and we show them the technology that we utilize. It isn't just sledgehammers and shovels. There's tremendous amount of technology to make that high quality steel to service your customer on time. And that's what we prove out to them. We show them that we're an engineered oriented company that operates based on science for the benefit of our shareholders, our customers, and our employees. We go as far, recently we've changed our approach where we've re-implemented our internship program for college students. I think we got 40-some interns coming in here in another 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
47.
40. now we're not only focused on the management positions, but we're highly focused on our hourly positions, where we're actually going to the high schools. And how do we get shop class back into the high school? Yeah. So people learn how to read a tape measure and operate a welder and so on and so on. We've re-implemented an apprentice program because we can't find qualified hourly employees off the street anymore. Right. So we have to build them ourselves, but then we're going to have to invest in a pipeline starting at that high school level to build it so we have that continuous flow of highly qualified people into our organization. Yeah. In regards to your first question, I want to say this. Our board makeup has 27% women on it, and it was higher than that, but we just had a recent retirement. Of my salary workforce, 37% of my salary workforce are women, and my vice president of operations and my general counsel are both women. So we have a focus on a very diverse work environment, and we relish and honor everyone's opinion that comes out of that diverse work environment.
And no matter what your background was when you came into the steel industry, lawyer, IT, whatever, you can still become CEO.
No, I was a computer scientist.
I know, you came out
whatever.
of IT. Yeah. You can become CEO.
Yeah, but I think Barry said something very important. We have a formal, I'm sure SDI does too, and probably all the other companies on this panel, but we have a very formalized mentoring program that goes down. I actually have 2 or 3 mentors at various levels in the organization that I mentor. That mentorship, I'll be absolutely honest, got me where all the opportunities to advance, to get to other companies, and to ultimately end up to be the CEO of Timken Steel. Yeah. So I think it's critically important, that mentorship program.
Right. I'm so tempted to go on and on this. I also think the issue of the perception of the steel industry is so critical in terms of how you attract young people. But we're going to run short on time, and I want to leave time for Q&A. Let me move to the very last question, which is very simple but very difficult. Steel making 25 years from now, in 2050. So put on your prognosticators and share with us, we'll go right down the line, share with us, what will the American steel industry look like in 2050? Technologically, environmentally, in terms of workforce, whatever, however you want to answer this. Give us 60 seconds, and then we'll move on to audience questions. Barry, Mr. President, the new president of AIST, what is this steel industry going to look like in 2050?
Well, a lot of times I describe the mini mill industry as farm to table. So I think in the future, as technology allows us to do steel making, specialized steel making on a smaller scale at world-class costs, you'll see smaller plants popping up that take advantage of the local resources. With the distributed power grid we have today with renewable energies, I think you'll see the mills go where the power is, go where the customers are, and I think you'll see a much more integrated footprint, kind of like we have at Sinton, Texas, where our customers are co-located on our site because we're taking a lot of the inefficiencies out of it. So it's kind of a small version. We don't need these 30, 40 million ton plants to make cost. We need to make the right products that the community needs. So I think you'll see more of those.
Yeah, great. Rich, how about you? Steel in 2050.
Well, in 2050, we were the first North American headquartered steel company to set a 2050 net zero goal. So we'll be net zero by 2050. Count on that. And I think that'll be part of the challenge and the opportunity and what the steel industry will look like in the U.S. It'll be much cleaner and greener. I do think, as Barry was sort of saying, we'll see more technology. I mean, the opportunities for automation are incredible. We actually invested last year in it's called Carnegie Foundry. It's an incubator affiliated with Carnegie Mellon University for robotics and AI. And the opportunities are endless to automate, to bring machine learning and AI to manufacturing. And I think we're going to see that just really speed up and accelerate. You mentioned ChatGPT. Yeah. I think the people who are going to be running the steel mills in 27 years will be computer scientists, basically. It'll be very high tech, and very, hopefully, attractive to this to the people coming out of school as a high-tech industry.
Awesome, great. Sushma, what do you think? Nucor and the steel industry in 2050.
Yeah, I did ask ChatGPT what it would look like 25 years from now.
You did?
I did. Didn't have a lot for me.
I was going to say, what did they tell you?
So I'll flip it around a bit here. You know, it's the question is what is the panel saying in 2048, 2050 as they're sitting here? And I use the word evolving. Right? Are we doing enough today to make sure that those panelists 25 years from now can talk about the success that was had, not that they're still fixing the problems of old? Right, so this whole idea of intentionality to make sure we produce steel cleanly, we keep steel out of our country from countries where regulations don't meet up to what we want. Did we produce and retain the workforce of the future?
Yeah.
Right, all of that, and I believe Nucor will still be leading the way then. So.
Great, good. TRACI, Cleveland Cliffs and the industry.
So Cleveland Cliffs will still be going strong. I do think that the blast furnace technology will evolve. We're going to continue to knock down the greenhouse gas emissions, where you're going to walk. You're no longer going to hear about smokestacks. It's the water stacks or the water vapor stacks. But I think you're going to see more manufacturing here, and I think you're going to see more closed-loop recycling partnerships. But we're going to be seen as the advanced manufacturer, the clean steel manufacturer, and hopefully employer of choice.
I love it. I love it. Great. Mike, you get the last word on this.
It's easy. Steel making is going to be really cool.
Really cool. I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that. Well, the good news, ladies and gentlemen, is that it's highly unlikely that I'm going to be around in 2050 to hold you accountable for these comments today. But some of you folks will be, and thank you so much for participating in that last prediction. And George, if I can turn to you, I know we have questions, I'm sure, from the audience.
Yes, we do. And first of all, thank you for all the questions. There have been a lot of them. Some of them have been answered as we went through the process here. Ron and I are going to try and go through a number of them with the time that we have left, but thank you for taking the time to send us the questions. First question, in your view, how could we let consumers know whether they are buying green or dirty steel when they purchase appliances? Do we need a system like the Energy Star efficiency rating?
Great question. Great question. Anybody want to take? Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, so there is a system that's evolving for just that. It's called, we belong to an organization, it's a nonprofit across the globe, Responsible Steel. They're developing a product certification standard that will tell you, what is the embedded carbon content of the product, and it's something that will be audited, third-party standard. Think of it like the Energy Star, or if you buy, I don't know, fair trade coffee or something, you've got an independent, audited confirmation that your steel is green.
Other thoughts on that, Barry?
I was just going to say there's going to be a lot of talk about that, because that platform is really biased against the use of scrap materials.
Yep.
No, that's not true.
It expects different tolerances for different steels. And the Global Steel Climate Council, which Nucor and ourselves are on, we're just saying you need to look at the carbon. Don't worry about it was graded okay by this organization that wants to give us reason not to make hard choices. It's the carbon. Let's just talk about the carbon where it's at, talk about where it's going, not, oh, it was a little better than it was a couple years ago. So I think there's a lot of discussion to happen on that.
Yep.
And it's just beginning to happen. And it comes back to educating the consumer, educating the customer base. We're already having very good discussions with customers when they come back to, well, it's just about what the baseline, it is about what is there, right? I said, yep, that's all it is. What's in it today? So a lot to be done.
I know there's this dispute between Responsible Steel and is it GSCC?
Yes.
GSCC.
Yep.
Yeah. Is there a third way?
Well, there is.
Or should there be?
There are multiple ways, unfortunately. I do think that's a dilemma that we do need to sort out. Cliffs is working with the Science-Based Targets Initiative to see if there's a way we can responsibly and scientifically set the pathway to near zero steel production.
So to answer the question that was asked, I think there's a desire to have some kind of standard, but it's not clear yet what that's going to be.
We're going to need another 2 or 3 town halls to figure that one out.
Yeah.
All right, so next question. Trade partners are very important. We realize that trade with Europe will be important, especially with regard to green steel and the companies making the investments. We want to find out, is the USMCA agreement, so our closest trade partners in Canada and Mexico, is it working as intended for our industry? Net good, net bad? Where do we stand with that?
Anybody want to take that?
Net good.
I think you already sort of talked about that, Barry, a little bit ago, I thought. Others?
It's working.
It's working. Positive, all positive?
I'll say it's generally working, but we see surges of steel from Mexico, and the U.S. government was supposed to implement a surge mechanism to make sure that Mexican imports stayed within historical levels, and I'd say it's iffy on whether they're enforcing that.
Gotcha.
Agreed.
Yeah, great. Go ahead, George.
Okay, the next question. The panel said the years ahead look to be boom years for the U.S. industry. How much risk do you see from imports, especially from friendly countries, as they try to take a piece of the action?
Always a good import question. I mean, part of the issue, of course, is how much of that steel from friendly countries is actually from China.
Right.
Yes?
Yeah.
Am I right?
That's the question.
That's the question.
And there's quite a bit of steel that's still flowing in for construction products coming in through Houston that are from Asian countries. And I know there are trade issues underway right now as we speak that most of the time we collaborate with. But the risk is when another economy is really damaged by something that happens regionally, they have to get tons out, they have to generate dollars, and our economy is a good place to go. So we always have to be very vigilant about what's coming into the country.
Do the Buy American provisions in all of this legislation that's been approved that's pumping billions of dollars, is that enough protection, in your view, against an issue like this?
Well, I think it's a good thing, but those discussions are always watered down a little as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of discussions happening behind the scenes on this Build Back Better, what constitutes American-made, what components. And there was a circumvention discussion about the solar panels themselves that allowed them to keep coming in through other countries in Asia. So I think you said it earlier, you know, when the government's involved,
Exactly. Go ahead, Ron.
All right, so we kind of touched on this next question briefly, but I'd like to explore it a little bit more, and let's bring a closer period, maybe 2040. So in America, 2040, let me back up. Today, 70% EAF, 30% blast furnace in the United States. Let's just take that as a nominal market share. In America 2040, will we have integrated production? And what percentage of total market production would still be owned by the blast furnaces, especially if we think about scrap perhaps becoming a precious metal?
Well, Rich and TRACI, we'll start with you on this issue.
You're really trying to start a conflict here, aren't you?
Well, I'll go first. I mean, I think, question I'd ask the audience, when was the last blast furnace, new blast furnace constructed in the United States? I think that's your answer.
Yeah.
The trend is electric arc furnaces, not more blast furnaces. Right. How long can you continue to run them? I mean, part of that is development of what you're all working on, carbon capture techniques for blast furnaces. Does that technology mature? What do we do with the carbon? Do we turn it into some new product? Do we pump it down old oil and gas wells? So those are I think the challenges.
That is the challenge and the work that's underway. It's finding the ways to continue the tried and true technology, I will call it. You will never hear me say, no carbon. You need carbon in steel. And we still want the advanced high-strength steels. We need the formability. We need the superior quality. That comes from a blast furnace technology. From my understanding, there's work underway to make those steels in an electric arc furnace, but you're going to have to add metallics to get the quality and the strength. So then you're eventually going to be running your EAF much like we run BOFs today. So what's the point? So we're working at ways to continue to cut down on the greenhouse gas emissions, find better opportunities to recycle, bring more scrap into the mix, and be responsible producers of steel.
Ron, if the questioner was asking if we're moving from 70-30 to 80-20 or 90-10, we're not going to get an answer.
No.
I would say there'll be blast furnaces, but they're going to look different.
They're going to look different.
Yeah.
You cannot discount the cost effectiveness of that process.
That's
So
right.
it'll be an interesting evolution.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Very good.
The next question we also touched on, Mike gave some good insight on this, but we all agree that recruiting young workers is important. But for many Gen Z, a college degree isn't as important as it once was. How are you adjusting your recruiting to attract Gen Z workers who choose not to attend college? I know Mike touched on it, but maybe we could get
Yeah, these are all
more
great
input.
questions. Some of you may know the governor of Pennsylvania basically issued an executive order wiping out the college degree requirement to be a state employee in Pennsylvania. And you know, the notion being there's a lot of alternatives to a 4-year college degree. Anybody want to respond?
I can take that. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, we're connecting with high schools and the communities and letting the communities know who we are and what we can offer to try to attract more people.
Do you require a college degree?
In some of the roles, but not all of them, no.
Same. We've always recruited right from our communities, right? And that's for decades we've had. Example that TRACI used, we've changed what communities look like based on the wages in that area, and it doesn't require a college degree. It requires people that want to win, capability, ingenuity, and we've got that in spades in our company, and that's right at the heart of the culture as well.
Great. Do we have time for another question?
Two more.
Two more. Okay, let's go. That's great.
All right. So the government is, the U.S. government has been really trying to work with industry. But as we're learning and hearing from our members and constituents, the government doesn't really know how to work with the iron and steel industry, and the iron and steel industry really hasn't figured out how to work too well with the government and public-private partnerships. If some industry-wide consortia brought together steel producers, research centers, I think universities, let's say, with research centers, national laboratories with very specialized expertise, perhaps in nuclear energy or renewable energy or computing skills, and the relevant associations of our industry. If that platform came together to facilitate efficient interaction with, let's say, the DOE or the DOC, would this industry or your company be interested in supporting such a platform?
Interesting question. These are all great questions.
Well, I think that's what AISI and AIST do now. In my 2 years in this role, I've had direct involvement with the Department of Energy, others in the company with DOC. I think we have the resources. I think we just, again, need to do a better job of explaining who we are and the good things we do.
Yeah.
I think we would absolutely be engaged with that. It's a venue like AIST is the common ground we all come to for these things. I do think this last offering was more of you know, the hydrogen thing. It's a difficult thing when it comes to intellectual property because we all make investments and we all are championing different things. So we have to be careful where that interacts. But at the same time, there's so much common good for our industry, and AIST has been that place that brings us all together, particularly when it comes to technology.
Rich, I saw your hand there.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with TRACI. I think there are mechanisms, and you know, we interact with the Department of Energy. A number of our CEOs were invited to the White House on March 3rd to meet with the Biden administration to talk about decarbonization of the industry. So I actually would say I think there's a pretty good mechanism there. You know, this administration at least is putting out sort of a whole of government approach with the National Energy Technology Laboratory, the DOE. How can we, they call it Project Earthshot coming out of the DOE. How can we reduce the carbon emissions of aluminum, steel, and these other hard-to-abate sectors? So I actually give them pretty high marks.
Yeah, good.
All right, this is going to be our last question. So as an industry, we're pretty good right now at advocating to ourselves that our industry is safe, our industry is green, our industry is smart. But when we talk to a lot of young people who are not in the industry, they seem to think, and we hear it firsthand, that our industry is unsafe, that it's dirty, and it's low tech. We talked about it a little bit. I think, Mike, you talked about this. But how can the industry collaborate to change this perspective, not to the choir, not preaching to the choir, but to society? How can we do that?
Panelists, you know this question because I talked to each one of you about this topic, because this is, and I didn't plant this question, but it's really, it really bothers me that the industry does not have the perception that it ought to have. And each of you as companies can do your own little thing in your own areas, but it really requires, I think, an industry approach. But correct me if you think I'm wrong. We'll run right down the line on this one because it's a great last question. Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned earlier, I sat in on a World Steel, the most recent World Steel board meeting. It's not just a US problem. It's, especially in Europe, it's the same dynamic where the perception of the industry by people who aren't part of it is it's the old smokestack, dirty, low-tech industry. My personal view, I mean, we each can do what we do. We have a partnership with the Steelers to promote STEM and careers in steel. We do other things with community colleges, but I think the industry has to listen. You can't just talk to ourselves and have this echo chamber about we're clean, we're safe, we're high-tech. You have to listen to what this younger generation is saying is important to them and start addressing it. And I don't think we do a very good job of that. How you get the right people in the right room to talk about the benefits of a career in steel, the high-tech nature, the chance to make an impact in society, those are things we need to do.
Great. Sushma.
Yeah, this is, I think, goes right back to this whole idea of being a solutions provider. We can't sit on our heels and think that it's just going to take care of it, right? So we're having conversations with the GMs and with the Microsofts, and you don't build data centers without steel. You just don't do it. And they need to know where that steel's coming from, right? So part of it is education, part of it is taking away the misunderstandings, but it's got to expand well beyond anything that we're doing just within our industry. And if we think we're going to just fix it right here, we're probably not going to. So creating that better solution all the way around and make sure that we're partnering the right way there.
Sushma, thank you. Barry.
Well, I have a couple of 20-something kids, and I took my daughter through the mill for the first time a couple years ago. She had never seen it, and they're both scientific, an engineer and a neuroscientist. She was amazed at what we did in the mill. And if I can't bring that message home, you know, how do we ever get that message out to the population? But, you know, visiting a steel mill really opens eyes to see the technology, the AI, the computer systems and all the equipment, and all the people engaging with them. I mean, it's amazing to do. So we have to reach out more. We have to get more of our customers into our shops. We have to get them ingrained in how we do our business from the very beginning of the process. But it's something we all got to share that load. And a week like this, advertising this and all this great technology here is a great way to get this out.
Great. Thank you, Barry, very much. Tracy.
Agreed. We need to engage with our customers. We need to listen to our stakeholders, and we need to react. We need to evolve, and we will. And I agree. This is a great event, and we need to find ways to publicize. We can't take everybody into the steel mills because that wouldn't necessarily be safe, and it would be a distraction, right? But we do need to find a way to get the message out and show the exciting opportunities in there. And we're doing that through partnerships with Department of Energy's Better Climate Challenge, Better Buildings, Energy Star. So we are going outside of our comfort zone and trying to get that message out as well.
Tracy, thank you very much. Mike, once again, you get the last word.
Hey, I agree with everything that the panel has said. You know, my focus and our company's focus is getting the message at the appropriate age group as early as possible and really show them, I'll use my favorite word, the coolness of steel.
Right.
You know?
Early.
Early.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Great. Well, these have been great panelists. How about a big round of applause for our panelists today?
And thank you,
George.
John. Thank you, John, for all that you've done in preparation and getting this done. Before we close, I want to remind everyone that lunch is provided to all conference registrants immediately after the town hall, and we look forward to everyone meeting there to continue this morning's debate. I would also like to thank again the sponsors, the Systems Group, for their sponsorship of the event. I would also like to thank Central Metal Cut, Medal, for the coffee services this morning, as well as Viola Water Technologies and Morgan Engineering's for the water service. And for sponsoring the upcoming exhibit hall luncheon, we must also thank Agreco, American Iron and Steel Institute, Andritz Metals, Bogner, Calderys, and the Timken Company. And again, we want to thank our moderator, John Delano, our wonderful panelists, and I'm going to do it one more time. Let's give them a nice round of applause for the effort that they put out this morning. And last but not least, I have to say again, thank you to the AIST staff for all their efforts. And this concludes our program, so have a safe trip home. Look forward to seeing you all next year. Thanks again, everybody. We appreciate it.